mental health, specifically sleep. So you can learn more about our lab and the research that we do by scanning this QR code if you have your phones handy. And today we're going to be just jumping right in. So, if I told you that I had a secret for you to do better in school, for your teen to do better in school, to feel happier, to maybe perform better in sports or remember the lines of a school play better, even potentially improve your physical appearance, your skin, and how you feel and interact with other people. How many of you would want to know what that secret is? Perhaps unsurprisingly, given the title of this talk, that secret really is sleep. And today we're going to talk to you about why that is. So we're going to start by highlighting, what is sleep? Or sorry, starting with why sleep matters. So ultimately thinking about, why do we care about sleep? I think sometimes we think we understand sleep and think we know why it matters, but we're really going to get into the science of why it matters and how it can affect you on a day-to-day basis in terms of your physical and mental health, and then long-term as well. And then we're going to get a little bit more specific and thinking about when we say sleep, what are we actually talking about? Because there's multiple domains and areas of sleep that often aren't recognized and are important. And when we're going to talk about the science of sleep, or why do we actually sleep? And that's important, or how we sleep, or what drives sleep. And that's important in terms of thinking about what we can do to help get sleep. And that's the goal of today, is for people to walk away with practical tips to help improve their sleep, hopefully even starting tonight. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zaire and his team to get started.
Yes. Thank you. So we're going to start with some fun facts and the data. So we can't, as scientists, you can't talk about stuff out of data and facts. So according to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, teens ages between 13 and 18 should receive minimum 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night. And adults, like all of us, we need a minimum of 7 hours. So I'm turning to you all real quick. You just put in the chat. How much do you sleep and how many hours of sleep would you say you get a night?
We can even do a show of hands of how many people actually get that recommended amount of sleep each night, generally.
Yeah. Oh, I see some in the chat. We see maybe six, about 6.5.
Mhm.
Ziva gets it. They said seven. I see some fives, a broken five. 5 to 9, very unpredictable. And and Niv says she's a grumpy cat, so she has to get her 7 hours of sleep. And why does sleep matter, right? We we talk about why things matter, or we should do this, but without telling people why it matters, it's kind of hard to get sometimes, especially some of our younger folks, get them to really understand. So in these next few slides, myself and Jess are going to talk about why it matters and the importance of it. So when we don't get enough sleep, it increases the risk of infections. It increases the risk of having mood effects and disrupting our moods, messing up our school relationships and some of our school performance, right? Chronic lack of sleep contributes to heart disease and cancer. And a good thing about sleep that some people probably, should know intuitively, but if they don't, sleep helps repairs and restores your tissue. So especially if you're an athlete or you're a busy person, you always hear somebody say, make sure you rest, make sure you sleep, make sure you relax. So that's a big aspect of it. Sleep helps.
Yeah, and just to add on that, we know that sleep affects or poor sleep can affect your cardiovascular system, right? So how your blood circulates in your body. So not only is that why in part it leads to heart disease, but it also can lead to an increased risk of stroke. And so poor sleep is also accelerates or increases, right, the aging process over time as well. So just some other fun facts there.
Additionally, when you're looking at these four components and these four aspects of sleep and how it can impact it, right? We start with mental health. So some people who may have a short, poor, or irregular sleep, they're more likely to develop anxiety and depression and think about suicide. So you think about suicide ideation and suicidal thoughts. There you go. Sleep problems are one of the top 10 warning signs for suicide. And then emotion regulation. Sleep impacts your emotional regulation, right? So getting enough sleep helps you stay emotionally balanced and keeps your mood steady and consistent. When you don't sleep well, you might feel a little bit more irritable, stressed, or even struggle just managing your mood and controlling your mental health, right? Stress, right? When we don't get enough sleep, we have an increased level of stress at times. So when we have less sleep, we have increased issues, such as, you may feel worse at home. You may things that you thought you enjoyed may not be enjoyable so much anymore. You may be a little more irritable, and it also impacts our cognitive function. So sleep is important for when you thinking clearly, helping you solve problems. And when we don't get enough sleep, sometimes it's harder to handle life. It's harder to think straight. It's harder to learn and focus. So these are some of the other areas that could really make it difficult for you to just enjoy your daily life. So your social interactions, your interaction with your friends or peers or coworkers, these are all can be impacted by a lack of sleep.
Yeah, one of our research studies showed that, like thinking about how much you get sleep on average. So if you're someone who typically gets 7 hours and then you get 6 hours on one night, you actually saw even next day effects. So like those short-term decreases or not getting enough sleep or having poor sleep, even on a day-to-day basis, it has immediate impacts on how you feel the next day. And not only did it make people feel worse when they had like an interaction that was bad or interacted with a friend or a family member, it made those feel even worse on those days. It actually, like, dampened or took away some of the positive impacts, so they reported feeling less good when something good happened. There's really a double-edged sword is when you think about actually, when you don't have good sleep, right, we feel more irritable. So we have a shorter fuse. So all of these things we know, but there's also research to back this up, and then it's harder to, as Zaire said, think clearly, but really kind of regulate those intense emotions. And for teens, especially, where they already have pretty intense emotions, it's even harder to really regulate those in those moments of when they're feeling pretty bad. And I
And
apologize the
additionally,
slide when I downloaded them to PowerPoint, they were on Canva. The I didn't check the transition. That's why the titles are a little off. So I apologize.
additionally, right, when we're talking about sleep, what does sleep impact? So the four quadrants here are, academic performance, your physical appearance, social interactions, and sports. So academics performance is really important. All of them are important, but this is geared towards parents and youth, right? So if you're a parent and you see your kids' grades slipping sometimes, thinking about sleep. So sleep impacts and performance by having lowering your memory, it lowers your focus, and in turn, you may have lower test scores and worse grades. It also makes learning and problem solving harder. So when you think about, learning problem solving, those are a lot of social emotional skills and social emotional domains that we tap into. So then we go over to your social interactions. Lack of sleep leads to your irritability, like we stated earlier, and poor mood. People who sleep deprived, whether even this is just for not even just for children, but also for adults. So people who are sleep deprived are rated as less approachable and friendly. I'm sure if you saw some person who, sometimes they can say they're coffee, but I need my coffee in the morning before you talk to me. But sometimes it's like, well, did you get enough sleep last night? So then you're thinking about your physical appearance. Sleep deprivation causes dark circles around your eyes, your dull skin, and breakouts. Poor sleep also speeds up aging and increases puffiness and sports performance. Sleep is key for muscle recovery and reflexes. As we heard in last slide, sleep helps rebuild your muscles and tissues, right? So poor sleep slows down reaction time and increases your risk for injury. So especially if you're a high performing athlete, you may not see it, you may feel like cognitively awake sometimes, but if your body's not getting it, it's detrimental to you and your performance overall.
And so now we want to switch to learning a little bit more about sleep. And this is going to help us think. We talk about, all this poor sleep. What are we actually referring to? So I want to start with, how did you sleep last night? So you can add right in the chat. I'm going to give you some options or you can raise your hands. But how many of you would say you slept great last night? How many would say good? How many would say just okay? And how many of you would say pretty bad? Okay. So now I want to ask you if you're willing to share, um, what were you thinking about when you gave that answer? When you said just okay or good, what aspect of your sleep last night was it that came to mind? Yeah. Thank you for so I see some responses coming in. How I felt when I woke up, how alert or or rested I felt. When you saw the clock and you woke up in the middle of the night, the length, so how much sleep. Yeah, how you felt when you were waking up, how long it took to fall asleep, and then thinking about continuous sleep. So really, when we talk about sleep, as you can tell, even just we think about that sleep quality, how we think we slept, it's based on a lot of different aspects of sleep. So here are different components of what we consider to be the overall metric of sleep health. And your sleep health is actually a combination of all of these factors: sleep duration, sleep continuity or efficiency, so how continuous you slept, timing. We'll talk a little bit more about that and breaking that down, especially thinking about young people, but really also for people maybe working during the week as well. Alertness and sleepiness, and then satisfaction or quality. That's really what you all just reported is your satisfaction or quality with the sleep you had last night. So let's dive in deeper. Marcus, you want to get started?
Sure. So, most commonly when people think about sleep, they think about how much they slept or what we call sleep duration. But this is just one element of sleep, and there are other important components like how continuous you slept or your sleep quality. Your sleep quality is based on how long it took you to fall asleep, how often you woke up during the night, and how long it took you to fall back to sleep when you woke up. It also includes the time that you went to sleep and the time that you woke up for that day as well. It also may be based on how you feel like during the day. So how sleepy you feel or how refreshed you feel. These are all important components that define your overall sleep health.
But a bunch of you actually said how you felt when you first woke up. And so I really want to introduce you to maybe a new term, which is sleep inertia. How many of you have heard the term, or for the phrase, I should say, a body at rest stays at rest, right? Newton's first law of gravity or law of motion, known as the law of inertia. And so when it comes to sleep, this is actually a temporary state of grogginess and disorientation that usually occurs immediately after waking up. And for some people, not myself, it's a very short period. They have a low inertia. So they wake up and they actually feel pretty ready to go for the day. And that's because of their sleep inertia is actually just lower than someone else's. For others, it can last longer. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, sometimes it's 45 minutes, even sometimes up to 60 minutes. And so when we think about that, one thing that, it's generally a helpful tip is that maybe how you feel when you first wake up does not actually reflect how you slept the night before. Now, after that first hour of the day and throughout the day, if you're feeling really sleepy, still that obviously might be a sign that you didn't have good sleep health the night before. And yet, when you're thinking about whether you should get up for the day at your regular time or if you should keep snoozing, which we'll talk a little bit about, maybe this is a good reminder as a key that how I feel right now does not necessarily reflect how well I slept. So maybe it is still a good idea to get out of bed as you planned, especially on the weekends.
And so looking at some other important components of sleep, we have sleep efficiency, which is essentially how well you sleep. And it's the percentage of time you spend actually sleeping while you're in bed compared to the time you're just laying awake in bed. We also have sleep latency, which refers to the time it takes you to fall asleep after you get into bed. So a lot of us may think about that time when we're like counting sheep before we fall asleep. Um, it's also important to consider nighttime wakings, which is essentially the frequency and length of time you wake up at night after you already fall asleep. This typically is less than 20 minutes, and if it's more than 50 minutes, it may be a sign of poor sleep. And now almost everyone will have difficulty staying or falling asleep at some point in their lives. But for many, it's experienced for short term. It may be caused by stress or changes in schedule or environment, and it can last for a few days or weeks. And sometimes people have such frequent or severe difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep and getting good quality sleep that it may reach a level of insomnia disorder. So to have insomnia disorder, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep and getting good quality sleep must occur 3 or more nights a week and last for more than 3 months. These problems also happen despite having the opportunity to have good sleep or not having health issues like sickness or pain, having a sleep environment that supports good sleep. So that's safe, it's dark and quiet as well. And so this can lead to like waking up in the middle of the night, trouble falling asleep, being awake for long hours during the night, not getting enough sleep at night, and waking up too early in the mornings.
And so one of the biggest sleep factors that actually contribute to some of these other problems and areas of sleep are about your sleep schedule. And that really we think about sleep timing. So sleep timing is the time that you go to sleep and the time that you wake up. So by a show of hands, if you'd like to share, how many people typically wake up the same time every day of the week? So during the weekends and the weekdays. Great. So, in general, how many people wake up within an hour of that typical same time? And how many people would say they have a little bit of a lie-in on the weekend, perhaps, or on their off or free days where they maybe sleep in 2, maybe 3 hours? So I will say for working with teens, especially, this is very common for teens, right? Because during the week, they're waking up at 6 a.m., so oftentimes earlier, depending on the school transportation. Sometimes 7 would be later if they are fortunate to live in a district that already moved their school start times later. But really, um, for teens in particular, they usually are sleeping then 2, 3, sometimes 4, even 5 hours later on the weekend to try to quote unquote catch up for that missed sleep because they feel so sleepy. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. But sleep regularity, and this is what we'll talk about in our tip section, but having regular sleep, a regular time that you're going to bed and waking up, particularly waking up the same time every day, and having that consistent schedule is one of the most important things that you can do to improve all other aspects of your sleep health. And specifically, social jet lag is a term that we talk about that is a really irregular sleep, but specific to that weekend and weekday. And that can make it really hard to feel rested and to get good quality sleep. So, by example, well, and this is probably not gonna work with animation, but, social jet lag is, many people have felt the idea of travel jet lag, right? So you traveled to a different time zone. This little character, right, you went west from New Jersey to California, and then you came back to New Jersey, and so your body was on a California schedule, but then you came back and you had to wake up on a New Jersey schedule or East Coast time. So social jet lag is just like that, except you aren't physically traveling, but you are sending your body to a different time zone by waking up at 6 or 7 a.m. on the weekday and then sleeping in until 9 or 10 a.m. on the weekend. And that would be great if you could actually have spent the weekend or time in California or Hawaii or wherever it may be. But in fact, you're just physically sending your body or mentally sending your body every weekend to a different time zone and doing it over and over again and wondering why Monday morning comes and your body is waking up in California time, that 10 a.m., but in fact, you have to get up for school at 6 a.m. And this is a really common experience with teens, and in this repeated cycle, you may remember even from your own teenage years or high school times, is something that can contribute to this really irregular sleep, and then having difficulty falling and staying asleep as well, and specifically also waking up in the morning and feeling rested. Oh, we already did this one, so I'll skip that. Go ahead.
So now we're gonna talk about why we sleep. So these next few slides will explain the science behind why we sleep, and this becomes very important when we think about ways we can improve our sleep and tangible tips.
So first, let's understand, what sleep pressure is. So there's three different factors that drive our sleep. So sleep pressure is also called the homeostatic sleep drive, but sleep pressure is the colloquial term of the way we commonly say it. Our circadian rhythms, right, which we'll talk about in a minute, and psychophysiological arousal. That's the third process that drives sleep. So sleep pressure, this is essentially your body, the longer that you're awake, the higher your sleep pressure is. And so theoretically, if you wake up at 7 a.m. and you're regularly going to bed around 10 o'clock at night, your sleep pressure should be very high at 10 o'clock. And that's quite literally what sleep pressure is it just increases over time for the longer you've been awake. But what happens if you take a nap at, let's say, 4 p.m.? How might that affect your sleep pressure, do you think? Would it be as high at 10 o'clock? Would it have continued to increase? Or maybe it took a dip and then when 10 o'clock came, right, it's not going to be as high as it would have been had you not taken a nap. And we're not saying that naps aren't good. We can talk about at the end, we have a little slide that talks about the how and when to take naps. But really, you think about it, this is one of the most important things. So when we are having that irregular sleep and we're sleeping in on the weekends, especially thinking about that Sunday, you sleep till, let's say, 9 a.m. on the weekend, and then you're trying to go to bed that same time you usually do at 10 o'clock. Well, if your sleep drive just isn't going to be that high yet. So when we think about napping, you think about sleep, our sleep is like a pizza dough, right? And that it can only spread out so far until you get holes in it. So if you think about napping in the day, you're essentially stretching out that sleep dough. So you're going to have holes in your sleep when it comes to nighttime. So it's possible if your body's really regular, you might still be able to fall asleep, but your sleep drive wasn't so high. So you actually might then wake up more throughout the night. So that's where if you go to bed, maybe without having a high sleep drive, you might fall asleep, and then maybe you wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and your sleep drive has already gone down. So essentially, this way sleep pressure works is it increases the longer you've been awake, but then it decreases the longer you've been asleep. But if it's not that high when you go to sleep, it's going to be decline and go down when you're sleeping, and you're going to wake up in the middle of the night. So the idea with napping is that you can nap, but you don't want to nap for too long, and you don't want it to be too close to bedtime so that you have time to continue to build up that sleep pressure. And so now if sleep pressure was the only factor that affected your sleep, and then I think many of us would have much better quality sleep, right? Because that way you'd have no problem falling asleep whenever you were really tired. So let's say you pulled an all-nighter, you should theoretically then have really high sleep pressure, and you do. But as we know, it's not just the case, and that's because of our circadian rhythms. Our circadian rhythm is actually, think about circadia, or around the day, and it's literally about clocks. Our body has every cell in our body has a clock gene, and our bodies run on about a 24-hour cycle, actually just over 24 hours. And so if you think about your body as the orchestra, and so everything's trying to run on a cycle, your body likes to know what to expect. There's a part of your brain that is the conductor and really decides all the clocks. And light is actually what drives that master clock in your brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, fancy word. But basically, the light is what drives that part of your brain that tells your clock, oh, it's time to perform. And so then that part of your brain's like, all right, let's go, let's get going, and really gets everything in your body on a cycle. And so when you think about your circadian rhythms, you might notice other things that actually are on a rhythm. Has anyone ever notice that they feel hungry around the same time of the day, right? That maybe like if you typically hit, and that's if you have a regular eating pattern. If you typically eat lunch around the same time every day, you're going to notice your body's going to start to get hungry, or you're going to have those hunger cues because your digestive system is on a clock. It runs on a cycle, just like because of that part of your brain. So ultimately, if light is what drives the clock, this is where light is one of those really important factors. So when we get exposure to light in the morning, it helps set our clock every day so we know what to expect. Similarly, that's one of the reasons why Melatonin, which is related to that clock, right? So melatonin is a hormone. We call it the hormone of darkness because it increases as nighttime approaches. And if you have too much light in your environment, it actually will suppress that hormone and make it harder for you to feel sleepy. So this is where the role of light in setting your circadian rhythms and helping your body know what to expect is really important. But there's a third process because oftentimes someone might be like, well, I have really regular sleep. My body kind of should know, like, this is what time I should wake up. This is what time I go to bed. And I have good sleep pressure. So why can't I fall asleep? And that's because of that third process.
So the third process that we should consider is psychophysiological arousal, which is essentially activation of the brain and or the body. So our mind and body arousal is regulated by our autonomic nervous system, which has two components to it. We have our sympathetic nervous system, which we refer to as fight or flight, and then our parasympathetic, which we refer to as rest and digest. So fight or flight response is the opposite of what you want before you go to sleep. So what are some things that may activate the sympathetic nervous system or get you into a fight or fright response? We can think about things like watching a scary movie or getting spooked or scared by someone, or getting in like an argument. Things that are going to cause you to feel like worry or angst, or more alert, will activate your fight or flight response. So we want to try to limit activation of the fight or flight response, especially before sleep, because that's going to put our body in a state of alertness or like excitement, and make your mind and your body more aroused.
Yeah, that is something that often when we think about if you're someone who gets into bed and your brain just starts going and it's harder to maybe turn off in those moments, because the arousal system, right, your body's activated and it's going to make it really hard for the rest and digest system to come into play. So that's where targeting those worries can be a really helpful way. And we do have some things we can talk about after in the Q&A if people are curious about that, because that tends to be a big factor that affects sleep. And so those are some of the internal factors that drive sleep, but there are actually a lot of external factors that impact sleep, especially when you're in middle or high school. So this can include early school start times, as I mentioned earlier, starting school at 7:30 a.m. I forgot to mention actually, but the circadian rhythm is not the same across your age, across your lifespan. It actually shifts over time. And this is where shifts later throughout your teenage years, really peaks in lateness around age 21 and then slowly gets earlier and earlier over time, in terms of your body's natural rhythm. But again, that's where teens specifically, don't have a say in their school start times, which is technically they're waking up during their biological night. So if you have an early school start time of 7:30, anytime really even before 8, that's going to be something that's going to impact sleep. Also, teens have homework, and university students have a lot of homework. So if you're someone who's staying up late to try to get that work done, or you have a part-time job after school, if you take care of siblings or other responsibilities, or maybe you're having sports or extracurricular activities that also keep you stay up, and then you're doing your homework, or maybe what happens sometimes you just need some me time after having a really busy day. You need to kind of have some downtime to just unwind. And sometimes it's socializing with friends, sometimes it's just reading a book or scrolling on social media. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we're happy to chat more about the impacts of social media and specifically phone use. But research shows that using social media or your phone in the 30 minutes before sleep will contribute to disrupted sleep. It might not be um, a problem with falling asleep for everyone, though that tends to be the biggest factor, but it can also contribute to problems staying asleep as well. And that's because light, even artificial light, suppresses that hormone of darkness, melatonin, making it harder to feel sleepy and throwing off our circadian rhythms. So other things like not having a good sleep environment, which Marcus had mentioned earlier, or one that is loud, bright, stressful, or unsafe, those types of things can also affect it. So even having like lights that shine into your bedroom, so trying to get dark curtains, things like that can affect your sleep. But most importantly, now I'll turn it over to you all.
Yep, and, before Niv takes over, like, Jess was saying, that's also an equity issue too, because if like, when you're a child, you don't control where you live.
Mhm.
So if you live in a high traffic area with a lot of trucks, or you live near a warehouse or you live near a shipping yard or just anything that's always busy,
Mhm.
that's environmental right there. So there's some things that you can't change, but as she stated, there's things we can do, and she's the expert on this. So if you have any more of these ideas and questions, stick around because she would definitely be able to talk to you about those.
Say a great point. And we do see disparities in sleep problems and insomnia disorder, and then the chronic medical and health conditions that come as a result of having poor sleep. I will say that one thing that can help in terms of noise is actually white noise, because that's more reliable and consistent. And so having a white noise machine, which are pretty affordable generally, that's actually maybe something we can talk about a collaboration on. But those kinds of things are actually really good to have because that sound, while it's noise, that kind of noise actually can help promote sleep. And pink noise is a different frequency of noise, and that actually has been researched to be helping promote slow wave sleep. Which is stage 3, which is actually your most restorative stage of sleep. So I actually really recommend. I don't know the results of those things yet, but they're investigating it for preventing cognitive decline in older adults right now. I would say pink noise might be something that to invest in. So, how can we get good sleep?
Yeah, so we spent so much time talking about how what are the different things and aspects of sleep, but like, yeah, how do we get it? How do we get there? And I think one of the first things is keeping a regular sleep schedule. So we've talked about the circadian rhythm, we've talked about the mind-body arousal, but one of the most important tips is keep getting a regular routine and going to the bed around the same night, or going to bed around the same time each night and getting up at the same time in the morning. And that's because our body thrives on routine. As we discussed earlier, it runs on a clock. And one of the biggest aspects of maintaining this routine is light. So, waking up around the same time will help keep that clock in sync, and your body will know when to expect sleep and wake time, leading to you having better quality of sleep and feeling more refreshed and having more energy. So, part of this is creating that routine. So, what can we do? So, this is for night, wind down routine. There's a lot of different things that we can do for creating that wind down because what do you want to do? Besides the light, you want to signal to your body that it's time to calm, it's time to decrease the arousals in your body so that we can set our mind up to, hey, it's time to sleep. So, different things you could do is doing relaxing activities before bed, like reading, meditating, stretching, improving your sleep environment, comfortable mattresses, pillows, bedding, and then sleeping in a cooler environment. And of course, minimizing background noise, no TV, TikTok, social media, dimming lights. So brightness, as we mentioned before, suppresses your melatonin and disrupts sleep. So I think that like one of our like habits that we tend to cling to is, oh, like let me just go scroll on Instagram for 5 more minutes. Let me just go on TikTok. Let me do three more reels. But these are different things that kind of increase arousal, and they're turn-ons to our brain rather than turn-offs. So I think we really have to make an effort to find ways to remove these distractions from our environment. It could be putting your phone on Do Not Disturb. It can be actively removing that phone or your distractions to a different room and replacing those stimulation with things that are more relaxing. So, reading, meditating, stretching. Something that I've tried to incorporate more into my routine is journaling. So I have like a little journal by the side of on my nightstand, and I just kind of write about my day. I like to do like like the sunshine and thorns. It's like, okay, what are the 3 good things that happened in my day? And what's something that I'm looking forward to? And then what's something that I want to work on or improve. So just like time to reflect, or it could be reading, having like a book by your nightstand. These are different ways to tell your brain, okay, it's time to calm, it's time to rest, so that we can prepare ourselves for sleep.
Yeah, and your wind down routine doesn't have to be 25 minutes because a lot of people don't have that time. It really can be 5 minutes of just the same 4 or 5 things you do every night. So for instance, maybe you come upstairs, you lower the overhead lights, you put on a little night light, you go in, you wash up for the night, maybe then you get in, you do a stretch or right, whatever sequence of events, but it can be really short, but it does help cue your brain, okay, this is time for sleep because our brain likes associations. And associations helps it know what to expect. And we also, that's where we're also having poor associations, which we'll talk about on one of our advice things related to our using our bed, can prevent good sleep.
All right, so now after hopefully a good night's rest, you kind of want to get into a good rise up routine. So first thing for that would be trying to wake up at the same time every day. You know, we kind of discussed that social jet lag. If you're waking up at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday, but then on Saturday you're not waking up till 10 a.m., you're definitely not setting yourself up with the best rise up routine. So really try to make it so that it's waking up at the same time every day so that sleep is really consistent throughout the whole week. I like this tip here, the scheduling something fun with a friend. So maybe trying to get out and do something in the morning so that you have something to wake up for instead of maybe laying in bed for a bit longer than you might. Then this next one, exposing yourself to natural light. I think that's a great way to help wake you up. You know, it kind of suppresses that sleepy hormone, which we've talked about, melatonin. So then you get to feel more awake. I know, you know, if you're waking up at 6 a.m., that might not be something that is immediately available. So when you have your alarm go off right in the morning, try to turn on a light so that you're feeling more awake a lot quicker instead of kind of laying in bed in the dark. Move your body. So again, when your alarm goes off, you kind of want to get up. You don't want to be laying in bed for too long. Trying to do something that has movement, like maybe doing a little exercise, like not too long after you wake up, something light, but trying to get that connection between your mind and your body that it's time to get going for the day. And then, of course, we hear this all the time, drinking water, and that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So having a nutritious breakfast that would include stuff like carbs and proteins, really setting you up for the rest of the day. All right, so some do's and don'ts when it comes to good sleep hygiene. So, kind of like how we discussed for the downtime, engaging in a relaxing low light activity. So, that could be reading. We talked about listening to soft music. Niv mentioned, you know, she likes to journal. I do the same thing too. I'll journal right before I go to bed, and it really kind of sets my mind at ease. And then maybe even some deep breathing techniques. And then a don't that is almost parallel to that is you don't want to be laying in bed on your phone using a bright screen that's telling your brain to wake up, watching TV or engaging in any stimulating activities while you're trying to sleep. So that would be something like going on TikTok, going on Instagram, or doing something that would really keep your mind up. So then another do would be getting out of bed if you can't sleep for more than 20 to 30 minutes, and then you return back to bed while you're sleepy. So you really don't want to be laying in bed for like an hour as you've been trying to fall asleep. That can just get really frustrating. So then a don't would be staying in bed while you're tossing and turning, which would obviously just increase frustration. A good tip when you step out of bed, if it's been 20 to 30 minutes and you're still not falling asleep, try and do something that you might find really boring. So for me, that would be like doing laundry. I hate doing laundry. So if I get up and I start doing laundry, eventually my body and my brain is just gonna be like, I don't want to be doing laundry anymore. I want to be sleepy. I want to be laying in bed. So kind of finding something that's a bit boring for you to do and then hopefully returning back to bed and being a bit more ready to sleep. And then using your bed only for sleep. So again, you don't want to be doing homework in bed, even like scrolling through TikTok again, playing games on your phone, um, all of those things. You don't want to be associating that with bed. You want to be associating sleep with your bed.
Yeah, and that's because actually people who really struggle falling or staying asleep often describe it as like the bed becomes the enemy. Like I can fall asleep other places, but I can't fall asleep in my bed. And that's because of something called conditioned arousal, or our brain makes an association that the bed is not for sleep. So essentially, a part of like even brief behavioral treatment for insomnia, one of the evidence-based, like one of a treatment that works basically for helping target sleep problems. This is one of the main strategies is like really limiting other types of activities that you're doing in your bed. So your brain can help retrain itself that like, oh, I sleep when I'm in my bed. So if you're lying there awake, it really triggers that other process Marcus talked about, that psychophysiological arousal, psychological and like body and mind, right? Arousal. So essentially, you're lying there frustrated. That's your sympathetic nervous system. Your heart's going, you're frustrating. It's like you're in a fight with your bed. And so that's where one of the big things is if you get out of bed, if you can't fall asleep, or even if you wake up in the middle of the night, if you're heading to sleep, of course, stay in it. If it's not like a 20-minute timer, it's really if you just feel like you're lying there and you're just not going to keep going, just actually changing the scenery, getting out, going somewhere that's relaxing, distracting, and in low light. So, really, I would say that generally, like someone's like, oh, I started cleaning. Cleaning is not something it might be relaxing for you as a de-stressor, but it is not something that's going to get your body ready for sleep. Doing homework in the middle of the night is not going to get your body ready for sleep. That's going to be activating again. So something like podcasts or reading in low light, things like that are activities that will actually help you kind of get your body ready for sleep. And then the key is going back to your bed when you're sleepy, so that when you sleep, it's in your bed, not on the couch, not in another space, and you retrain your brain that bed is for sleep.
Okay, so then when we're going into improving sleep health, sleep problems are a lot more common than we might think. Roughly a third of young people do experience sleep difficulties. A lot of the things that we have discussed are ways that we can help improve our sleep. So what we're doing before bed matters. A lot of the things that we just discussed, are we doing relaxing activities so that once we get to bed, our body is ready and that we're sleepy? Limiting blue lights that would be coming from our computers and from our phones, limiting those stimulating activities that might get our mind racing. And then obviously no caffeine before bed, because caffeine is kind of one of those things that we use to get awake, so that really wouldn't be useful when trying to go to bed, and those heavy meals as well. Naps, we kind of discussed naps already. If you're napping a lot during the day, you are kind of taking away from kind of building up that sleepiness throughout the day. You might struggle a bit more trying to fall asleep at night. And melatonin, a lot of people will take melatonin right before they're going to bed, but actually, I've heard this like wanting to take melatonin at dinner. So that would be 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. And you don't even really need to be taking a large amount of melatonin. Some people will be taking a ton of melatonin, but you really only need just a little bit, and you would be taking that around dinner time. And that's how you're kind of getting the beneficial effects of melatonin.
Yeah, it's
And
really recommended. The
just
1 to 3 milligrams is what's typically recommended, but they sell it usually in like 5. But there's something like it's not FDA regulated, so you have like 10 milligrams. You have extended release. That's the last thing you want is an extended release melatonin, because your body actually naturally melatonin decreases in the middle of the night. So extended release would make you feel groggy, and so anyway, melatonin can be helpful for some people, but it's definitely only if taken in smaller doses, because that's your brain receptors only has so much space for that type of hormone. And then 3 to 4 hours, as Molly nicely said, like pairing it with dinner.
And one thing around food and eating habits, I know some people may not realize, but a lot of some of the things we drink or eat, um, a lot of sugar is really detrimental to sleep. Sugar has been shown to lessen your slow wave sleep, and that's really important. So try to also, we have no sugar, we have no caffeine in heavy meals, but sugar is very deceptive. So make sure you check what you're eating and drinking before bed and at the end of the day, because one little drink or something or a little piece of this, often it definitely throw your sleep off.
And I think when you talk about relaxing activities, just some like key things for relaxation techniques. There's a lot of different really helpful deep breathing exercises or meditation, exercises that you can really find, on your phone, and have a podcast ready that just kind of plays them so that you're not even using the screen for those types of activities. But honestly, sometimes they're really slow. It's really the deep breathing out, the slow breathing out part that can really help calm. So a lot of us spend, myself included, a lot of the day with our shoulders up here, right? We're just kind of doing, going, doing, busy, and maybe we're not feeling so stressed, but we're just kind of running around, living our lives, being very busy, and our breathing is faster, and our shoulders get tense and tight, and that's where most people carry their stress. And so actually, like, one very simple exercise is like, well, with kids, I did a lot with kids with anxiety, but it was great with the turtle, where you kind of put your shoulders all the way up, like as if you're like in a turtle, and then actually try to lower it. And that's, for some people, just noticing the difference of like, wow, like it like helps lower your body, and then kind of pairing that with some slow breaths out, you start to relieve some of the tension and start to calm your body physically down. I have a lot of great kid exercises. I do them with adults too, but they're about imagining like animals and stretching, but they're really, that can be really helpful for really slowing your body down and your breathing down and calming your brain too, because that's a big problem people have about falling asleep.
Yeah, and so we also talked a lot about social media broadly, and as Dr. Hamilton mentioned earlier, a lot of our research in our lab is focused on understanding social media use in sleep and looking at how and when social media may disrupt sleep. So we know that we know that it can impact sleep, but we don't know specifically what aspects of social media, besides just using it close to bedtime, and who may be affected the most. So we have different studies going on in our lab that I'll share a little bit about, and Dr. Hamilton. So we have our first study that's looking at social media study called Identifying Negative Violence Exposure on Social Media in Teens in New Jersey. And so this study is really looking at experiences with violence exposure on social media and how that impacts teen mental health and sleep. So this study is, there's a baseline survey. So that's the first survey you would take. That takes 45 to 60 minutes. And then for 1 month, you would answer daily surveys on your smartphone and wear a physical activity monitor and watch a sleep monitoring watch. And then another survey 3 months later. And for the study, you can also get up to $200 to participate. And our goal largely is to look at the relationship between negative content exposure on social media and sleep amongst teens. And so this is a study that we're doing right now. And this QR code will take you to our screener to see if you're eligible to, should you want to participate. This is for teens 13 through 18. So you can also feel free to share with any teens that you may know who are in New Jersey as well.
And Marcus, you'll drop the flyer in the chat too, if anyone wants to share it with someone they think might be interested. That would be great.
Sure.
And then we also have something called Project Sleep, which is a brief online session. And so really this is a lot of our research focuses on trying to understand these things better. And this is our study where we're actually trying to help people learn about sleep. A lot of what we talked about here, where we go over the science of why we sleep and help teens better understand the specific things that they can do to help improve their sleep. So, so far, our preliminary results are looking good in terms of helping people learn more about sleep, value sleep more, and also think that there are things they can actually do to help improve their sleep. This study is for people who are 13 to 25 years old, but anyone is able to take it as long as you just enter in your information. We look at the data differently, but ultimately you can do this if you're interested in learning about sleep, some of the things we talked about, learning a little bit more about it, and thinking of ways that you can actually take these things that, why we sleep, what we can do, and coming up with an individualized plan. So I wanted to share this with you as well, because we hope it's helpful to help people continue to learn, value, and improve their sleep. And we definitely have time for like some questions and answers and stuff as well, since this is really just giving the service on everything sleep. You could do a whole semester course on sleep. And so we crammed it all into the 50 minutes. But want to just say a huge thank you to the amazing Hamilton Lab team for doing this, especially the 3 undergrad research assistants who helped create these amazing slides from all the content that we have, Lasia, Mercy, and Malika. and also have a QR code if you're able to fill it out. So we always are looking for ways of improving how we're talking about things. How can we, help people learn about sleep in a way that feels interesting and engaging, and hopefully help them think about practical ways they can improve their sleep. So we'd love for you to give us your feedback on today's presentation for ways that we can continue to make this better. So thank you all, and a special thank you to the Urban Health Collaborative and Zaire for partnering with us for today's workshop and letting us all talk together about my favorite topic, and what we'll all hopefully do soon after today's presentation is sleep.
Yes, thank you all. Yes, just a ditto. We've been partnering for a while now. Well, not that long, but long enough to say while. And this is what it's about. Truthfully, not just being researchers and scientists to just say, hey, look what we published, but no, it's bringing this to the people, to the parents, and to the people and the youth who need this. Because I don't know about some of you, but when I was younger, nobody was talking to me about important stuff like this way. So it's it's an honor for me to be in front of her and just partner with somebody like Jess in her lab, because it's we sometimes we're in the ivory tower and then we forget that, whoa, there's people. But she's not one of those, I could promise you that, and her lab is an epitome of that. So these partnerships are, to me, life-changing, trailblazing, because we're setting the tone for the next generation to realize that research and scholarship, it's not just something that's stiff. We're young and fun. So yeah.
I like that you consider me young, so I will take it. No, thank you so much. Really, truly. And thank you all for coming and attending today.